Zoom.
Is that
We
on
should
Jason?
all talk to Jason about Zoom
How do we get to that?
all day.
Oh, we have that picture on Facebook with you. Shane, or not Shane, Dean had one of the best captions for you.
It was on the money, for
There's a
sure.
couple pictures out there that Melissa
There we are, we got everybody on there.
Do
Very
you have
good.
handouts here? There's two versions of a
Oh,
net
yes.
sheet.
Okay.
I'm taking both of them. How are you today?
Where do we have access to this one here?
We don't, but we don't. We only have access to this one.
I'm happy to email
Yeah,
everybody.
we'll be sure to share that.
Do you want me to take copies of this one?
Yes. More about that, okay.
Let's see, someone else was whatever. Oh man, I hate these keyboards that are up like this.
Here's the crazy thing, her password, folks, is dot, 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 dot.
Give me my Mac.
Another.
There you go, and then there's one you want.
Oh, perfect.
Holy, what the?
Yes. Okay, you log in, you log in.
There we go.
Okay, we have to wait at 9:30, it is 9:30, so let's get started.
Let's get started. All right, well, I am so thankful to see all of you here in person and such a large number of realtors on Zoom. This is a class that I feel passionate about as your broker because as I am responsible for compliance here at the Market Center, I see everyone's contracts and I see everyone's net sheets and I see a lot of variability on the net sheets. And one of the things that I've observed about net sheets is so many of the blanks in the spreadsheets that we'll cover today are left empty. And what that says to me is that realtors don't feel confident in what number that they're writing there. And unfortunately then, if you're not presenting the clear expenses to someone's sale of their home, there is a potential for them to have surprises when they get to the closing table. When there's surprises, there tends to be frustration. We don't want them to be frustrated with you and we don't want them to be frustrated with us. So before I introduce our fabulous speaker today, I want to remind you there are 17 articles in the Realtor Code of Ethics. The Code of Ethics is put forth by the National Association of Realtors, and it is one of the original Code of Ethics for professional standards for industries all around. And in the very first code of the Code of Ethics, it is described that it's our responsibility to paint a crystal clear picture to all of our consumers what their expenses might be related to working with us. So having these net sheets is not something that we just do for the heck of it. It's something that we do for protection of you and also protection of the consumer. It's an expectation at Keller Williams Preferred Realty, though it may be different at other brokerages, that you do a net sheet with your client at the time that you're signing the listing contract so they understand their expenses. So you'll notice in Command, it's something that the front desk is going to require for you to be able to accurately upload a listing. And then it's also a requirement of KWPR that you also have the seller sign this net sheet at the time that they're signing an offer. So just to make it crystal clear why it's important, why we have two versions of it. We've got an estimate at the beginning and also an actual more accurate net sheet at the time that they're signing the contract. So Scotti, as having a background in accounting, has put together a net sheet that she loves and that I love. So I appreciate that she's going to be going over it today. But as a convenience to you, if you are one of those who use our templates in Instanet, I was hoping that Jason could show you how to get into Instanet and get into our forms. So going back to the basics, so you can see where our forms are. Ours looks like this. It will have the KW in the top right-hand corner. And then what I want to call to your attention is on the back, there are quite a few definitions. So in addition to reviewing the recordings that we have on the dashboard, you also can reference these definitions on the back, and these should be helpful to you. On the very bottom, you'll notice that it says this net sheet is approximate. Final numbers will be provided to you by your title company prior to closing. There's also a clause in there that just helps you out when your seller may be frustrated to having to order their association documents. There's a clause that says, per the state of Minnesota, it's required that the seller provide the buyer updated association documents, and it's their expense. So just so you know, what's on the back, those are tools that are there to help you, and those are tools that are there to help create clarity for your buyer. So, are you showing where to
Can you talk
find?
about that square?
I never seen it.
Sometimes when you go in there, they offer you a class. If you don't know what to do, don't just bypass it. Look at the class.
Oh,
That might be a class
Go to
that's
the class.
valuable for you.
go to the class. There
Don't
we
just
go.
get, remind me later, look at it and make a decision.
Okay, very good point.
Where we at?
All right, let's just touch on this, KWPR seller's estimate of net proceeds. So this is a worksheet that if you were to create a listing using the KWPR templates that you would pull up, and there's some auto calculations in here that you can utilize to make it a little bit easier. I know Scotty's form is going to be better and more thorough, but as a quick tool and resource for you, this is the one that's been approved by Greg Hartos, and this is the one that our market center uses. Would you just touch on the dashboard? And the dashboard, when you scroll down, oh, it looks really different. Did you completely reorganize that? I mean, honestly, I prepped for this yesterday at like 2:30.
What are we looking for, man?
I think Kelsey got a hold of it.
Of all the forms.
Because it looks pretty.
You too. Okay. So on the KWPR dashboard, just a reminder to you, when you go under resources and over here under on-demand training, we have a whole YouTube channel that has me talking through almost all the forms. And then after today, it will have Scotty talking us through this net sheet. We currently have one there with Colin.
No
We
pressure.
currently have one there with Colin talking through it. But don't forget, that's a really good tool and resource for you. So I just wanted to get a little bit of the housekeeping out of the way. But now, without further ado, I want to be sure to introduce Scotti Ringley. All of you know her from being around here in the Market Center, but what you may not know about her is that she was previously an accountant. So numbers are her forte. They are something that she's very interested in. And I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to help make sure that we all understand why these numbers are important as well. Take it away.
It's not lost on me that outside of maybe Tom and I, numbers are not necessarily the forte of a lot of realtors. So today, hopefully, you're gonna walk out feeling way more confident in the numbers piece of it, because to me, outside of relationship, I almost think it's maybe number 2 of importance. But before we get started, because I'm looking around the room and we have different levels of experience, tell me what you hope to get out of this class. Like, when you came, what was your biggest thing of, this is what I need to learn, this is what I'm not confident in? Slow down. Anyone?
I'll just add it. I think it's understanding what each, what some of the items are. Like, I think some of them are obviously self-explanatory, but there's a lot that people may not know, how do they, figure out if there's an assessment, or how would they get the number of, you know what I mean? People just don't know all of them. So I think maybe some of them that maybe aren't as common, just understanding a little bit of what they.
Yeah, and one of the points I'll make is fill each piece out. Like, I feel like if you don't understand it, a lot of times people skip past it. And like Melissa said, one of the worst things in the world is to get to the closing table and have a client be like, wait, what's this assessment? I didn't know I had to pay this assessment off. And listing appointments can be so long, and to keep your thoughts organized sometimes is challenging, because you've got kids running in the background and dinner's already in the crock pot and you can smell it and you're hungry. This helps me know all the things that I need to be sure that I hit in a listing appointment, which is, I think, cleverly why it's called, how to win a listing or use it in a listing presentation.
So to catch on that, with listing appointments potentially being long, how do we get the agents to buy into actually doing this form at the listing appointment to say, hey, these are your potentials, what this is gonna happen. Yes, I know we've been doing this for 2 hours already, but this is why it's important to do this.
I would guess that the only reason why agents don't do it is because they're not comfortable and confident. Because to me, this is, and it's just me, this is the easiest part of my listing presentation. Because I know it inside out. It's not intimidating to me. Steve, I'm sure you would probably feel the same, you've been in business long enough. I think, even though we have a lot of training that kind of tells you, you should be able to get in and out of a listing appointment in 30 minutes. I don't mean to buck the system here, but a lot of that is relationship building, and the biggest thing is they're gonna be comfortable with you if they're confident in your ability, and you're the professional. You gotta act like it. You gotta play the part. You gotta talk the talk and walk the walk. And I think your listing presentation and the net sheet presentation is the greatest way to show that you are the expert. So why you have to use it, even if you're on hour 2. And you can go through it very quickly, but.
And how to get an agent to really focus on the details when they're not details.
I think, yeah, some of it is, and we'll go into this, like, it's a liability to our brokerage. If you're not filling these out properly, and we'll go into that, it's a liability. You don't want a call from Melissa and Greg saying, I have a client that called very upset that your net sheet, you didn't disclose X, Y, Z, and now they're at the closing table super bad, right? You do have one?
I just had a couple more, if no one else does. Some of the things that I see most commonly blank, deferred taxes and special assessments, so how to research those. I think that can be more of a brainstorm. People can give us, how do you do it? What exactly is a lender commitment work order? And how much do you usually put in for that, especially if it's a VA loan? What's a lender processing fee? And how many docs are recorded?
What was the last time?
How many documents are recorded at the county?
One nice thing while you're writing that I noticed when I use the KW ones in the system is that some of these are already, once I start to populate one of them, they kind of populate themselves. So if I click on the little, whatever you call it, that section, that column, it's like, oh yeah, that's how much that was. So then I can kind of just go down. I literally click on everyone like, oh yeah, it's $50 for this, it's $30 for this. So it kind of populates.
We will definitely go through all that.
That'd be great.
And there's a reason, so this is the Greg Harto's approved one.
Yeah.
So for the record, this is a great one to use. I'm anal, and I like to know what the calculations are and why. So Steve, I think you actually might have created this 24 years ago.
Well, it looks a lot like.
I think I got a very elementary format of it 12 years ago, and then I've just throughout the years tweaked it and tailored it. And
Yeah, that's what I
so
did
give
too.
credit to where credit is due. I think this was originally Steve Earls and I was Apple Valley.
And I'd love to know why.
Why what?
Why you use this instead of this.
Yeah.
That helped me.
And I'll email this to all of you. Feel free to use it because Melissa has seen it a gazillion times in my transactions. It's formula driven. And unfortunately the ones I printed were in black and white, but you'll see up here, this is where you're gonna enter stuff or you really have to double check. And then it feeds the rest of it. And then even if you don't understand why this number pop up, you can go down here and see the Excel formula, thank you, where the numbers are coming from. That's how I've gotten confident with it because I'm not just guessing. And then also I work very closely with a good friend who's my title company, and I have all these fees from her specifically. And one of the things I do 2-3 days before closing, the title company will email your client and say, here's the estimated final statement that we're gonna go through at closing. Some of your clients don't even look at it, but I can tell you I do. Because what if the client gave you a bad payoff and they're getting $5,000 less than what they expected? Can you scroll down real quick? Here's my Scotti Ringley disclaimer. Numbers used in preparing this net sheet were provided by the seller or estimated based on information provided by the seller. So then they're not mad at you because they gave you a payoff that's $5,000 too low. Now again, being conservative, when they tell me the payoff is $192,300, I know by the time we close, they probably will make another payment, but I still round up. Because I say this in the appointments and I think it gains some credibility. I would rather under promise and over deliver than have you at the closing table going, what the heck, right? So keep that in mind.
195 or 200, like how much rounding up are you?
So like 192.2, I would for sure go, 193.
Okay.
And again, I tell them these are just estimates, and I always point out this is based off what you told me. And some clients will actually send you their payoff. Just keep in mind, Depending on the day of the month you're closing, which we'll get into, the number is gonna be different than what they just pulled off the internet, because there's daily interest that's calculated to the day of closing, which is why I round up. And then I look at the final settlement statement and I'm like, yep, there's the $92 in recording satisfaction fee. There's the $30 courier fee. There's the, just so that I know I'm using good information, you gotta constantly go back and keep double checking. And every title company is different, so if you have one that you're committed to working with, I would send them this net sheet if you want to use it and say, are these accurate based on your company and your fee structure? Many title companies will say a $3 title company fee, but then have a $200 doc search fee. It's not apples to apples, so get it from yours. Worst case,
I think the other thing that comes up a lot that I see with newer agents is the fear of having something wrong and then just not doing it, right? And, or not putting it in. And the other thing is that it doesn't have to be perfect. Right, is you're telling them that already. And when they push you and they say, well, what about this, what about that? And you say, well, did you give me a payoff? Right, you haven't told me that. Do you have a second mortgage? You haven't told me that. I can't make it that accurate because I don't have those two pieces of information. So what I'm gonna tell you is how much the house will sell for. I don't know how much you're gonna make because I don't have those two pieces of information.
well, which is why I kind of use this form that I really like it, because it forces me to go down the line and I present every single piece of this. I'm not like, here's what your proceeds will be. Are we good with that? You sign on the line. It's not like that. This gives me a chance to say, how about a second mortgage? You haven't had a, and I'll ask all the questions in 3 different ways usually. You don't have a second mortgage, no line of credit, no equity that you've taken. I mean, I'm asking the same question, but 3 different ways, hoping it triggers, oh yeah, we did take a HELOC out to finish the basement. They even know what a HELOC is, but you know what I mean? So it just gives you a chance to ask these different questions. And I always say, hey, this is a very broad estimate. It's not perfect. It's gonna get you fairly close, but it's important that you have all the information to make an educated decision on whether you wanna sell your home, what list price we should use, et cetera. And I'll go into how I use the 3 columns very strategically in my listing presentation. So anything else? Okay, good news. Outside of maybe a couple, I think I'm gonna make the rock stars by the time I leave here. But, you know, okay, so basic question, what is a net sheet? It's basically a disclosure. I'm gonna stick to my notes because I rabbit trail if not. It's just an itemized breakdown of all the expenses associated with selling a property to deduct from a targeted list price that you, the expert, are helping provide, so that they will know the sum of what they'll receive at closing. Be sure you use the word net, because it's a net sheet and they may not understand, because I have clients say, now, is that net, like of what I'll really bring home? And we're like, that's what I said, but yeah. So say, this is what you should expect to receive at closing, the proceeds that you should receive, assuming that these expenses are right. And I also explained everything's negotiable. So we will go back through this net sheet at time of offer and fill in every single one of these. And even, because I'm anal, at the top, you even can put the day. If you're closing on the 3rd, there's 27 days of interest that need to be considered. If you're closing on the 31st, it might be different, right? So we will go line item by line item. Stop me if you have any questions. Let me know if you think some script role play would be helpful and how to present it or what to say. Just interject. This is a workshop, not a lecture. So definitely jump in and participate. So I just listed some important reasons of why this net sheet is so important. 1, compliance, right? You have a license that you are subject to different compliance rules. It is required by the brokerage to be filled out at time of listing and at time of offer acceptance. Do not shortcut that. I've had calls from different agents that they're like 3 days from closing and they're like, oh, for compliance, I need to update a net sheet in Command or whatever, and I haven't done one. Like, you are doing a disservice to your client if you haven't done it at the time of offer. Because so many, they might say, sure, I'll pay for warranty. Sure, I'll, pay $2,000 for this to get whatever. You better update that net sheet. Because again, though you've done your part and they negotiated it and they agreed to it, numbers speak louder to people. than concepts oftentimes. So there is a significant exposure to the brokerage if you do not fill it out at all or accurately. One example that I think of is even though you have a listing, a listing contract, where you put in there 6%, 7%, whatever it is, if you fill out the net sheet and you only put in your 3.3, because that's all you're really worried about, and not the 2.7 that you're paying out to the buyer's agent, guess what? They have a false idea of what their proceeds are, and they're going to be mad at closing, and they're gonna chew you out, but then they're also gonna call the KW office. And so it is a liability to the brokerage. It's important that it's filled out accurately. It helps you gain credibility. You are the professional. So like I said earlier, fill it all out. Here's your chance to illustrate your qualifications. And some of you are newer and you're like, I don't have any qualifications. Play the part, be confident in the numbers, and the rest will come with time and experience and practice. It really just provides them comfort that they'll have an estimated financial picture, not only at the time of deciding to go ahead and list their home, which is the scariest part, but that this is where I tell them, I will be with you every step of the way, and we will walk through with every offer, and then up until, well, we're in multiple offers again, but there when we were having 3, 5, 7, 10, I use this net sheet, and instead of 3 columns, I've got 10. Because it is, I think, and you can use Command. Command has a great feature where you can go in and put each offer and put the terms. It's just not as detailed, because how many of you know not all offers are created equal, even if they're the same offer price? Some buyers may say, no, I'll assume the assessment. Some will say, no, the seller has to pay it off. That could be $4,000 right there. So to me, I put everything in here and I end up adding a bunch of rows here, and I'll go down, and we'll go through this a little bit later, but I go down and we'll write closing date. Sales price is already here and some of the math calculations, but I'll put earnest money, who the agent is, who the lender is. Are they providing an underwritten statement prior to closing? That's important to a lot of people. You don't want to have if the way the contract could be written, the day of closing, they could back out and get their earnest money back. I don't allow that for my sellers. So an underwritten statement is important. Are there any work orders that they've agreed to pay? So that's a potential risk that they might have to pay some work orders. Is there an inspection? So there's so many things in a contract that aren't heavily number related, but very critical when picking the right offer. So to me, since they've already seen this and I've walked them through it in detail at the listing presentation, when I'm presenting offers, it's very familiar to them, and then they can truly compare offer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? It also helps the seller plan for potential listing expenses. It gives you, the agent, time to discuss certain pre-list steps that need to be taken. Like for example, some of our clients, everyone does things differently. I provide a free staging consultation with every listing regardless of list price. But then if they want to rent staging supplies, that's usually at their own expense. And so we may put a line item in there that says staging, $2,000 for the rental for 2 months or whatever it is. It's important that they build that in because they're not thinking, oh, don't forget to take that off the number that she told them. It allows you to talk about TISH, whether you need it, disclosure of any pending levy assessments. And again, when we go line item by line item, you'll hear the conversations that I have with them where I can confirm, do you know of any pending or levied assessments against your property? Most of the time they're like, no. But guess what? As a good agent, you've already done your homework and you've looked on the county record, right? But it's important that you have that conversation at the time of the listing appointment. Some people don't even know, like I think it's St. Paul that has like a $12 or $14 assessment to their county record for trash or sewer or something. Like there's different cities that it's not an assessment that has to be paid off in 4 years, it's an assessment every single year. That's important to have that in there because some clients don't even know they have it. They just pay their taxes, or the mortgage does. It also helps a seller to see if certain repairs or updates could have a significant impact on sales price. So if I'm talking to them about whether to finish that basement, they're thinking of listing in 3 or 4 months and they want to know, hey, we got a quote for $20,000 to finish the basement. If you can put in there, here's the sales price if you don't, If you spend the 20,000, here's what I think we can get, because it adds 900 square feet or whatever. Then when they look at the bottom of the line, because most people don't understand return on investment and stuff like that, and they think we're talking above them. But numbers tell a story, right? So at the end of it, if you spend that $20,000, we can sell it for 45,000 more. Then they are empowered to make the decision. You're not telling them what to do, you're giving them the information so that they can make an educated decision. Any questions so far? You're like, shut up and just go into the. Let's see if there's anything else here. We will go through some of these things again, because right now it's probably clear as mud. It will be a lot clearer when we go line item by line item. But how do you think we could use a really good net sheet in a listing presentation to secure the listing? Outside of like showing that you have confidence and all that. Like how many of you have walked in and you're like, I've done my research, I know the neighborhood, it's my own neighborhood, I know what they've told me they've done, but until you get in there, there are some agents, let me ask this, does anybody do a 2-visit listing appointment? I see pluses and minuses to both, so neither are right. Many people will have like a quick 30-minute visit or whatever to tour the home, and then they go back and put pen to paper and then meet them again. I have found my clients are pretty, nope, you barely got my time the first time. So I try to have as much prepared up front as possible, but you may go to the listing appointment and think, this could be anywhere from 450 to 550. Until I get in there and see it, I won't know. So can you think of a way that you could use this when you're not quite confident on sales price, but look confident once you're there in front of them?
I'll tell you what I've done. I'll do 2. Because I don't want to walk in and have it prepared from 450 to 550, but the houses were, or 4 to 5, the house is worth 550. So if I really don't know, and it depends on updates, and it depends on things that I might not know just sitting at my computer, I'll have one from 450 to 5 and another one from 5 to 550 or whatever the range is. And then I pull out the one that is appropriate once I'm in the house. They don't see both.
Well, that's where I go with this. Like, I don't think, at least half the time, I'm coming with 2 net sheets. The other half, I feel confident enough in a range, in 3 ranges. So like I'll walk in and I'll have one that says 450, 475, and 500. You never want to pick the first column because then they think their house is crap and they're insulted. So there's strategy of where to put the numbers. If you really have no idea that it's between 450 and 550, have one sheet that says 450, 475, 500, have a second sheet that says 500, 525, and 550. If you get there and you're like, wow, tastefully decorated, there's some wow features I did not know about, then you can confidently, and I'll tell you how I do this, pull out the one that says 450 and be like, based on what I'm seeing, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm very impressed with the condition of this listing. I think it's awesome, and I think we're in this 450 column.
Okay, sounds good.
What if you think the house could possibly go for 460, 470? What do you do? Don't be mad at me. Like, don't listen. Listen. They've already told you, like, if they're like, oh, we would love to get 450, and you're thinking, well, on this market, we get 460, 470. Stop it. They've already told you their litmus test that 450 is what they do. If you dare say to look good in a listing appointment, oh, I think we could get 470, 575. We should list it at that. And you have to reduce the price in 30 days. They're mad at you, even though before they were fine with 550. They're mad at you because you got your hopes up. So instead, you could do the, and I know I'm going into way more than just a net sheet, but this is how I use my net sheet in listing presentations. You can say, I think we should go for 550, but in this market we're in, don't be surprised if we have multiple offers. I would love to get you 575, but there's a danger in pushing the price point at the very beginning. And that's how they feel great because I'm in the 3rd column at 550 and they're so excited. And if we get more, great. But they've already told you their dream is to get 450. So don't try to look like a superhero unless, I mean, hear me, if they're really wrong and you know it's worth a lot more, clearly step up and say something. But a lot of times we're like, man, I got 3 offers on the one down the street. I know for sure they'd get more than that. You just gotta be careful, toe that line. So what I do is on the phone of listing, when I'm doing my kind of pre-qual conversation and I'm like, oh, how many bedrooms do you have? What work have you done? I will say, like, Sarah, will you run a script with me? Mrs. Seller, obviously, we all do it. You've watched the homes in your neighborhood sell. You probably have a pretty good idea what your home is worth. I'm gonna come with a lot of data and a lot of comps to verify what I think the target list price would be, but what kind of price do you have in your mind?
Oh, the one down the street sold for $440, and we just redid our kitchen 5 years ago, so we were looking for $550 or so.
So you have more square footage than that one? Have you looked into that?
And it's a very similar layout. I guess I don't know what that square footage was. Ours is about 3,800 square feet.
Did you see what I did? Like, because she's already told me she thinks that it's this price, but what clients don't understand, the one down the street sold for whatever, but guess what? If yours is 800 square feet smaller, it's not comparable. So I've made her excited about a better price because hers is better than the one down the street, but I've also pointed out it may be smaller in size, so this outweighs this. But I already know her litmus. I already know what price she's kind of expecting. And if you're doing your comp analysis and you can't get anywhere near that, you dig deeper. And you come prepared. And then what I would do is if 450 is the price she's expecting, but I think there's no way, I make sure I put it in the middle. Because if you put 450 here, or the point is you don't want to overpromise, you don't want to get them too excited when they shouldn't be, and you also don't want to insult them. This number, except for a couple clients that have been like, I just want to move it. I am fine going here, and if we get multiple offers, great. I love those appointments when I'm prepared to sell it at 450 and they're like, we'd be happy with 430. You know what? I just want to sell it in a couple days, put it at 430. It's not your job to tell them what to do, it's the obedience part, right? And so if they're willing to go 430, my golly, do. Because a 430 is a guaranteed sale. 450 is a, let's hope, right? Questions? Questions on Zoom? Well, and here's something like, Amanda, I always think about you because how many are familiar with Spirit, Gretchen, and Lakeville, right? Amanda knows it really well, and I've tried doing some comps in there, and if you've been in the business long enough, you do get more comfortable figuring out values, right? But there are some neighborhoods, Spirit being one, that, a great, beautiful house with the same square footage could be 575, but one of the original ones by a certain builder with higher quality build and products, same square footage, same number of bedrooms, could be $200,000-$300,000 more. So that's why, to me, it's important to ask those questions in the beginning, because they know that their house was more expensive. And of course, do your due diligence of what did they buy it for? Because even though that's not really a good number for you, it's in their mind. Well, I bought it 3 years ago at 450, it should be worth 550, right? Not necessarily, it depends on what's happened in your neighborhood, right? Trailer park just went in next door, and that might hurt values, or brand new construction just went in, and that might change values. So, okay. Once we go through each detail, I will show you how I update this at the time of offer to get accurate data. So, let's do that. And so Colin, I don't know if we want to share Colin's resource thing as well. I agree with and we're not all going to have the same outlook on net sheets, just agent to agent is going to be different. I agree with 90% of what Colin said. The only thing I didn't agree with is I put in mortgage balance. If I know it. Occasionally I don't, but my sheet will actually go through and tell you what are expenses with a mortgage payoff and what are expenses without it, okay? Yeah, so let's just actually start. Can we go back to there? They're very similar, and then like she said, on the back of the one that's on the MLS, or not the MLS, the transaction desk, has a lot of details, but it may not always tell you like what to plug in. It'll explain it, which is good, but mine will have some examples of what to put in. Can you go even higher? So always put the property address, right? Taxes. I go to the county, and because it's yellow, it's a field that needs to be, and you have to input a numeric value. Let's say it's $4,000 a year. I put that in there because there's calculations down here that are going to use that data. So how many of you know garbage in, garbage out, right? Bad numbers input wrong are going to spit out bad numbers. So I put that in there, And then I keep it on the 31st. Sometimes I change it to the 15th. It's all estimates, and I remind them that. It's all estimates, so that's really not that important right now. Interest rate, to be honest, I'm not consistent in asking, what's your current rate that you're at? I figured if they've bought any time in the past 10 years, 4 is probably a safe guess to put in there. And then listing company professional fees. If you are charging 6% commission, I think it is very important, and we'll talk about it below, why you should list out your fee versus the buyer's agent fee. Mostly because when they try to, will you discount your commission? You have to, will you go to 5? Well, you're paying 2.7 out, that only leaves you 2.3 and you're doing all the work. And I use that script, I'm like, clearly it makes sense that, my commission, my side would be a little bit higher because I pay for the marketing, I pay for the staging, I pay for the photography and the drone. And then they're like, oh, I see you're done. I hardly ever have anyone ask me to cut my commission once I've talked about this. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And then state deed tax. It's usually 0.33 of every 1,000, but Hennepin and Ramsey County are 0.34.
Correct.
Because I would rather over or under promise and over deliver, I just keep the higher rate in there. And I tell them, state of Minnesota requires us to collect, the state collects 0.34 for every 1,000. That way they understand there are some fees on here that are absolutely not negotiable, right? And like the $5 conservation fee. You may not want to feed the ducks, but guess what? State of Minnesota makes you pay $5 for every sale. Okay, so then down here's.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Is that for every 1,000 of the contract sales price?
Yes, and we go through that a little bit more down here, but I just want to kind of highlight it up here. And then selling price, maybe you've already agreed on the phone and you're gonna list at 400. Fine. Get rid of the other 2 columns. But I think it's important, if you're gonna list it at 450, maybe kind of throw 440, 450, 460, because people are usually okay with down the middle, right?
Scotty?
Yeah.
I call the conservation fee the loon tax.
You always say feed the ducks, you gotta feed the ducks. And then put in your payoff. So again, like we talked about, if they tell you, hey, my payoff is, 99,500, I'll just put in 100,000. And I remind them, this is what I put in, I just rounded up a little bit. Obviously, we'll get the final payoff closer to closing and we'll put in real data. Because again, you're reminding them that this is just an estimate, and that takes some of the pressure off you to feel like you've got to be perfect. You don't. You just have to really make sure you're filling out all the data, right? Interest adjustment. It actually will auto-calculate. Can you go to the field so you can kind of see the form? Yes. So with numbers above, it's basically saying that if you had a 4% interest rate and you're closing on the 31st, it's calculating the daily interest for you. I don't know if this one does that.
No.
I don't use this one, so does anybody know?
Would you read us what your formula is?
Yeah, I can just scroll back down again so I can see these. It is taking sales price times interest rate of the mortgage divided by 365 to get a daily rate times the day of the month you're closing. So like you'll pay 31 days of interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a few $100. This is not going to be what throws your nut shade off, by the way. It just shows you're trying to be as accurate as you can, right? This is where I say, how about a second mortgage? Like we said, 3 different ways I asked. Do you have a line of credit? Have you ever taken equity against your house? Is there any lien against your house that has to be paid off? This is also where we can have the discussion, because some of the modifications that were done during the pandemic actually added a second loan to their loan for the time they didn't have to pay. So this is where you would have that conversation. Interest adjustment, second mortgage, it's doing the same thing. Hardly ever do I really have to deal with that, but it's doing the same thing that this was. And these are usually pretty small, right? 20, 30, 50,000. Special assessments. Now, certified, does everybody know the difference between certified and levied? Melissa could not be more emphatic. No, they do not.
Trying to be so subtle.
So like one of my properties, we got a letter, hey, we're redoing the roads in your neighborhood, and we are going to do it this time, and $4,000 will be assessed to your property. That's kind of the notification of it. It's not levied yet, because it hasn't passed a vote and it hasn't done everything, but you've been notified. But guess what, in the contract, in the purchase agreement, it actually says what line item up here.
Yeah, it does. 231.
Okay, that's the good thing about this one actually, is it kind of tells you what line item in the PA that you would find this data or where you would look. You can write your purchase agreement that the buyer or the seller will assume any certified or any levied assessments. This is where I say, have you gotten any letters from the county that they're adding sidewalks or street lamps or repaving the roads? You have to ask the question kind of 3 different ways and give them examples so that it triggers in their mind, oh yeah, we did get that letter. Well, then you have to call the county and find out how far are we on the process? Has it been approved? Because once it's approved, it's now levied. Either way, you've got to figure out who's gonna pay for those at closing. And what I typically do is tell my clients there's a really good chance a buyer's gonna ask you at time of transfer to pay off any assessments. So I put the amount in here, the payoff. Be careful when you're in the county, don't be scared to call the county. On the county, sometimes it will tell you the current year amount and not the full amount that has to be paid at time of transfer, or assumed, I should say. So make sure you have the right amount, but I put it in here because I tell them, just with my background, I wanna give you worst case scenario. You'll love me if we negotiate that the buyer assumes it and you get 4,000 more. But I need to prepare you that there's a really good chance that they're gonna negotiate that you pay for it. So that's where I put, special assessments pending or levied. So here's where I start talking about new carpet, other updates. Are there any things that we need to do now or that we want to consider when we're thinking of price points that we should put in there? For example, like I said earlier, $450, but if we spend $20,000, we can get it to 500. So that's where I put 500, 20,000, just to show them the comparison. Is that making sense? So professional fees, again, I listed out, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, that it's kind of a liability to the brokerage if you only put your commission and you forgot to put that you pay out 2.7, and it calculates a number that's different than what's at closing. That's bad.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
For the selling company side, I've seen anywhere from 2 to 2.7. I know in Metro, it's usually a little bit higher. Is there a reasoning why they do it up here a little different than where?
Well, I guess I should say this is gonna vary based on what part of the state that you're in. Our brokerage, the minimum payout is 2.7.
Okay.
So unless you have somehow gotten special permission from the broker because you're selling 50 properties with this guy,
Yeah.
and you've agreed that you can do 2.5 on a bulk contract, I put 2.7 in there. You can always pay more. Like if it's a higher listing or you really want to attract agents to it and you want to split it 3-3, you can do that. But this is where you would detail it out.
That's
Like,
Yeah, so you have this 24 and 25 here, and then you also have it at the top.
24.
Yeah,
Oh.
line 24 and 25 here.
Yeah, I do because it's calculation driven. So here's where I have it, but then in the Excel formula, it's taking this commission times sales
okay.
price.
Gotcha.
I just
thinking
put
it
it here for disclosure again,
That's
because you
fine.
can never over communicate, especially when it comes to numbers, right? or
Perfect, okay.
finances.
I wasn't sure if it was pulling from up top and.
Yeah, most of them are pulling up top where the input data fields are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what are we on now? Settlement fee to title company. This is on-site titles. Talk to your title company. If in doubt, use mine. Required state D-tax. I have no idea why that is how I abbreviated it. Again, I remind them, just like we talked about above, you can assume it's going to be $3.40 per thousand of sales price. Yeah. And the formula, go figure, calculates the 0.340 up here times your price. Can you see why I like this one? Like, this is why I use it, because it's not dummy proof. I don't mean it like that, but it pulls the data and calculates it. Now, that's not what the client sees when you present it, but it gives me a chance to say it's taking 3.4 times number of thousands, right?
Scotti, could you like put numbers in so we can see how it calculates, or are you doing that at the end?
Yeah. The only reason I didn't want people being like, oh, Scotty had such and such in that field. Sure. It's formula driven, so why don't we go through it once and then we'll role play an actual sales price and see how the formulas are updated. Abstracting fee, updating title search, my title company says that's $300, so that's what I put in. Special session search fee, that's almost always paid by the buyer, so it's almost always gonna be zero. Recording fees, so the state charges, what's half that, $46 per recording document for satisfaction. So if they have one mortgage, it's gonna be 46. If they have two mortgages, it's gonna be 92. Newsflash, I'm conservative, I always keep it at 92. Because it's almost a way that at closing, it kind of offsets some of the, maybe the payoff challenges we had, or you look a little bit better, but if you know they only have one, feel free to change it to $46.
Is there also a fee for the deed to be recorded, like 2 payoffs of the deed? Although you've got it in a separate spot, okay. Okay, thank
Can you
you.
say that one more time about the recording fees? Can you say it one more time about the recording?
So recording fees is gonna be releasing of any mortgage satisfaction. So if they own it free and clear, there will be nothing there. But if they have a mortgage, it's $46 for the title company to go to the county and record this Chase loan was paid off. And if they have a HELOC as well, this HELOC through Laris was also paid off.
Yeah, and on this one, it says it's $25 and $30. Yeah.
That's 99.9% sure it's really, yeah, 46. I mean, unless title companies can charge different things, but she
No,
gets
it's
that from the
46.
county, yeah, okay. See my nerdy better. Okay, so service fees, other, it's just catch-all. I don't really have anything in there unless we know that there's, maybe we have to overnight some packages to a sister who's also on title in another state or whatever, but I just leave it at zero.
Would you put your staging fee there?
You could. I have some other miscellaneous expenses. There's other places where you can kind of put it, but, and feel free, I mean, you'll have this Excel spreadsheet if you want it, change it to whatever you need it to say. I just had it on here as a reminder, is there any other fee that I would be making? It's really just a benchmark or and then real estate taxes. Guess what? The formula does it for you. It will go up and say, you said there was, let's use easy math, 3,600 in taxes per year. This is gonna calculate however many months. Now at closing, or at time of offer, you're gonna put in when the closing date is, and you'll have to go back and adjust this to how many months you're actually closing. But for right now, when I go on my listing presentation, I just, calculation assumes 3 months. And can you go to the formula for me? So the formula, where are you? Oh, so it's taking times 4 months. It's getting a monthly amount, county taxes per year divided by 12 times 4 months, because it's assuming, or times 4 to give me a quarterly amount. Now, is that wrong? That's wrong, right? It should say 3.
It should say 3.
Yeah, it should say 3. Yeah. But what I do
We're
is,
gonna change it.
huh?
If we were gonna change
Yeah,
it.
if you're gonna change.
That's how you do it.
Now,
Will you, I'm sorry, will you tell me that
Formula?
equation again, please, that formula?
total annual taxes divided by 12 times 3, if you're gonna use a 3-month estimate. Now, if you're closing,
Thank you.
okay, this, how complicated do I make this?
Go
So
for
how
it.
many of you know that taxes are paid on May 15th and October 15th, right? So what if you are closing on May 30th? How many months of taxes, May 31st? Yeah, May 31st. How many months of taxes are they responsible for? It's not your question. 5, right?
5.
So at time of closing, they will have to pay 5 months of taxes. But if they have a mortgage, most likely that's already been paid from escrow. So if you want to keep it super simple, just put in 5 months and let them know, you know, it may be more than that if your escrow's already paid it. Because you may list something thinking it's going to close by, especially at the very beginning, and it may take longer, it may take less. So, but for example, what I do is if I know it's going to close May 31st, I'll put 0 in there or even calculate the credit. Because at closing, what's going to happen is the title company is going to say, first half taxes are paid. So the first 6 months were already paid by your escrow. Your closing, end of month 5, you actually get 1/12 of those taxes back, or actually 1/6, you should pay half per year. So I know that probably sounded really complicated. How many of you understand this or have challenges with it or want clarifying information?
Just so you don't feel alone.
Well, that should be
It still
everyone raising their
confuses
hand,
me.
because you said, do you understand it?
I know.
Or do you
I know.
understand?
Exact
People,
participation.
Can we do this?
All the above. Yeah.
That's a loaded question.
Right? That was an awesome question. Yeah. You can take into consideration when you know your listing, like sometimes you take a listing and you're like, this is gonna sell by midnight, and you know that. You can put in real data, but worst case, put in just a 3-month estimate and say, hey, understand this just assumes you're gonna have to true up at closing 3 months, and the title company will adjust it based on what your escrow's paid.
I just wanted to point out, there's a couple of notifications from the chat. I don't know if anybody's trying to ask some questions.
How much digging do you do with sellers since they have no assessments? Michael, I do a lot of digging. I go to the county before every listing appointment and I look on there. Not every county is as user-friendly as I'd like. Pick up the phone. I mean, we're in an age where so much can be found online, but this is something you really don't want to be wrong about. So I will call the county assessor and be like, I just want to confirm that there's no levied assessments against this property that I'm about to list. It's very simple, but do your digging. Clients, 80% of the time they know. It's the 20% that's gonna really hurt you, right? Other question, where can I find your custom-made net sheet? I will email it to, we have a list, can you make a list of everybody who's here for me? Or Victoria, could you make a list of everyone who's in the Women on Zoom?
If you send it to me.
Or it could be a form on the dashboard.
It'll just be on the dashboard.
Okay, there you go, there's
You
your
can
answer.
find it on the dashboard tomorrow.
There you go.
We can probably also put it in the Facebook group and then there's stuff in the files.
Is that the last question or is there another? Okay, where are we?
Real estate
Okay.
taxes.
Okay, everyone gets this? Any questions? There is no such thing as a dumb question, so feel free to ask. Okay, seller paying closing costs. Now, you'll want to update this. I used to, back in the day when it was very common to get 3% of closing costs, I had 3% times sales price in here, and then I would tell them, we can hope that they won't ask, but I need to prepare you that they will. And sometimes people's mortgage balance doesn't give them any, sometimes breaking even is the best you can do, right? Now, so many people have equity in their home that it's not usually a problem, but. So take this out if you're gonna keep it at 0. For the last year, I always had it at 0 because you couldn't get closing costs. Now that we're kind of getting back into there, you may wanna have that conversation with them. But again, it's just a bookmark so that you know to consider closing costs.
So to your point, I took it out for the last couple of years and I put it back in, and I just say, when I get to that line, that my goal is to negotiate closing costs out, so that that's an extra $10,000 in their pocket or whatever. But that it's there as that like worst case scenario, if they have to pay it, we know what that looks like.
And I will say this, the same exact thing, and I'll say, but understand sometimes it's the only way to get an audience. Yep, that way they're not like, you said you could possibly negotiate it away, sometimes you can't.
That's my goal.
My goal. But if you want to sell your house, we may not be able to, right? Keep in mind, there are a lot of rate buy downs right now that are happening where, have you guys heard about these? I think Marketplace has talked about it a little bit, that for the first year, it's gonna be 4.5, for the second year, 5.5, and then 6.5 from there on out until they refi. Programs like that, the seller has to pay the fee for the rate buy down. So it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of put something in there. But if you're competing against another agent, again, apples to oranges sometimes. If the other agent put in 0 and you were being super conservative and put in 3%, they don't understand that those are negotiable things. They look at the bottom line, they're like, Sarah can get us 10,000 more. Why would we go with Scotti? Because I was fully disclosing. I had it in there too. Okay, so association resale disclosure documents. For anyone who deals with either a home or a townhome that has association docs, I sometimes you're gonna put it in here because there's a few associations that will allow you to pay it at closing. It's rare, but I've had several of them. So I say paid ones, offers accepted, or paid outside of closing. I have no idea what the rest of that says. But I tell people, you can expect once we get an offer, or if you want to get ahead of the game, go ahead and order those HOA resale docs. And that's when I start having that conversation, like understand you own a home that is regulated by association docs, and therefore it is required, even, because many of them will say, oh, when I bought it 20 years ago, you know, and I'll say they have to be updated, and it's not just the legal, bylaws and articles of incorporation, it's also any amendments, it's the budget, it's the,
Meeting minutes.
yeah, the meeting minutes,
Yeah.
it's everything, and by law, you are required to provide that to any buyer. So I usually at the time of listing, keep it at 0. It's yellow to remind you that you have that choice of what to put there. Frankly, it looks better to just tell me I have to pay it outside of closing than have it as another fee deducted on here. But again, it gives you that chance to have the conversation, because there's nothing worse than them getting an offer and being like, what? I gotta order HOA docs?
Right.
And some of these HOAs are taking like 10 days to get them to you.
And they're
Some are
stupid
crazy.
expensive.
Yes.
Many of them are clearly like in the high 3s or 4s, and then if you want it within 7 days or 5 days.
Or if you need to have a master association too, and a sub, then you're paying double.
Yeah, there's like Spirit, I think, has a master and a sub, so you gotta pay twice.
Avonlea in Lakeville.
Yep. Okay, local inspections required. How many of you know, I don't know if it's on the dashboard, but it would be a great link if not. There are certain cities in the state of Minnesota that require for you to have a truth in sale housing inspection prior to going live. Yes.
I know all about those, if anybody has any questions.
Okay, there you go. There's your resource.
Structure Tech has a great link that has a listing of all the cities that require, whether it's point of sale, TIsh, time of sale, I&I.
Yep.
Um,
How many know what I&I is?
Is it updated? Like,
yes, they
because I
updated.
know Hopkins just took theirs off.
Oh, did
Did they?
Hopkins no longer requires it as of last year was the first year that they didn't require it. So I checked on one of the websites and it said Hopkins, it wasn't, so I had to call Hopkins, but basically, because of COVID, they just.
Yeah, Structure Tech is usually pretty good at keeping that updated.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Kerwin Group is who I use, and they have a list of what cities require what municipalities require certain inspections. For some of the new people, I know it sounds really scary, but you could really do a Google search, what point of sale inspections required for the city of Hopkins. Or like I know Golden Valley requires an inflow and infiltration inspection where they test the sewer line from your house to the main unit. And if it's not compliant, that has to be fixed before closing. Some cities on TIsh, truth and sale housing, will require the repairs to be made before listing. A lot of them, the buyers can assume it. Or before closing, I should say, not listing. But a copy of the TIsh has to be, how many of you know this? A copy of the TIsh has to be in the property, and it has to be completed prior to you showing it for the very first time. Karina's the local expert. Yes. Assuming the listing is live. It cannot be shown. You can't take it live, can you? You can take it live, it's just not about showing it until it's done. Yeah, the worst case is realizing it after the fact.
Yeah.
And hope no one ever busts you. Because I'm sure it's a pretty good fine.
I made that mistake.
I think it's like $1,000 fine.
How much?
1,000.
So do we even want to go into the difference between a TIsh and a normal inspection? Does anybody?
I don't even know. that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for, yes. Because I don't want to tell you things you already know. I want to tell you things that you need to know. So a truth and sale housing is more like city regulations, things that have to be done to be compliant to protect the city or in accordance with city or local ordinance. An inspection that a client does is going to be way more thorough and different things. So for example, St. Paul has this rule, like think of a lot of these older homes that have the tub, that like if this is the whole tub, the faucet comes out right here. So as water goes in, if the water goes above that, dirty water could backflow into the city water system, and they won't allow that. So that is something that you have to have a backflow preventer put on before closing. So they're looking for the number of inches of a stair. Like it's got to be a certain minimum. If it's less than that, It has to be adjusted. The only time I've seen that is when it's just called, not flagged as must be repaired, but as a concern.
It's as a disclosure only, the
Yeah.
only requirement for St. Paul is that they have hardwired smoke detector. If there's a home that does not have, even if it's just battery operated, they need to have a hardwired, that is the only requirement that they'll make.
Required?
No, it'll just,
Minneapolis then? 'Cause I've had-
Minneapolis,
Okay.
yes, Minneapolis and Richfield and Bloomington, I believe, will all be backflowed because they're all the same. But the only required repair for a St. Paul Tish is hardwired smoke detector in the home.
And they're looking for stuff like how wide apart are the
Spindles.
spindles in a deck? Does it have a
Handrail.
handrail? Like, an inspector maybe won't point those things out, or even know, frankly, depending on how good your inspector is. But there are certain things that are required in a Tish by city or municipality. So that's why it's important that they have them and that it's listed there on the table or whatever in the property. So homestead differential, this used to be a much bigger deal than it is now, but I kept it on here because, yes.
I can say something just
Yes.
because I feel like it was kind of left open with the Tish report, so that's never like your client's inspection. You definitely don't want them to feel like that's the information that they need, but I will say with St. Paul, you have to be careful because West St. Paul is different than
Yes.
St. Paul, and South St. Paul is different than St. Paul, so don't feel comfortable on just St. Paul, because I feel like that's the most confusing, because there is different pockets in different areas.
West
so.
St. Paul is I&I only
Yes.
versus St. Paul proper
Yes,
is
and
a
Yes, and West
time of
St. Paul
sale.
has their own set of rules, so just be careful in St. Paul,
Yeah.
just because you specifically said St. Paul, it was
Yeah.
like, yeah.
That's a good point. So homestead, so if the previous owner had it as their primary homestead and had a homestead exemption, and the buyer is writing offer on it, there is no difference. Like, if it's gonna be their primary occupancy, it will also be homestead. Let's say it's a rental property that does not have homestead exemption, and your buyer is buying it as a primary. The difference on taxes now, again, it's not much. Back in the day, it used to be several hundred. Now it might be 100. The difference between the exemption that you get for it being primary occupancy versus a rental or an investment property. See a lot of like weird looks. Does everybody get that? Okay. So I'll put it in here, like, just to have the conversation. Understand, if your property, Mr. Seller, is a rental property and we're selling it right now, it's not homesteaded, a buyer, there is a box on the PA that you can check that says the seller will pay for the difference in homestead exemption. So I have it on here just as a marker to have that conversation.
Can I add to that, also a mistake I made? If your client is buying an old farm and they intend to build a new house on it, there's a possibility that there was a green acres property tax savings on that farmland. And it is a conservation fee, so that farmers don't have to pay as much in property taxes as you would if it was like, real good developable land. And the problem is the deferred taxes do have to be paid back fully if it
Which
changes.
is why this would need to
status.
be disclosed on here. You'll see on the county record, it'll say something like Green Acres tax, something that will look really weird to you, and then that's where you.
Veterans, right?
Yeah, well, that's going on next.
That's
There's a
another
lot of
great one.
disabled veterans that get like a 90% reduction on their taxes. If you are selling the home of someone, because you've done that, you looked into MLS and you're like, property taxes are $100 a year for that disabled vet. So you'll wanna, it's not really your responsibility, but I think as a good agent, you should have that information. It's the buyer's agent responsibility to call and find out what will taxes be for a non-disabled, like for a normal, healthy individual, right? But if I have a listing, and I have, where the guy PTSD from being in Iraq 3 times, and he had 75% reduction. So I just called the county and be like, what would it be without that reduction? And then I put it in the agent remarks. Seller has disabled reduction in taxes, normal annual taxes are X, or call county to confirm. Really, that's probably what you should do, because that puts the
Or both.
responsibility on the buyer. Yeah. To cover your butt, both. Like, push that obligation back to the buyer's agent. Other miscellaneous expenses. How many of you know that if you are selling a property with a well and a septic, there are certain tests that have to be done? Karina's also the little like, Everything is negotiable. There's a box on the PA that says the seller will pay for and provide a well water test and get a septic compliance.
Get
I
it done
tell-
beforehand.
What's that?
Get it done before you list.
Yes, because it can kill the deal 30 days in.
And can take forever to get those tests back.
Especially in the winter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Water is usually within that, we were usually right at 10 days. Water's, I have found is pretty good. Septic, it's all depending on whether you can get somebody out there.
Doesn't, if your buyer ends up having a VA loan too, don't they require an additional test or something? An additional something?
So, for water tests, VA and FHA have different tests that they'll run. If you tell them, just get a water test that covers all of it, your butt's covered, so that you can get VA and FHA and USDA.
Sure, I haven't run into that, so I don't know.
I had it happen because we did it in advance, but then we ended up with a VA buyer and we had to have them come back out and do.
So what happens is there's 2 tiers, like you can get this test
Yeah.
for 100, this for 80,
Yep.
and your
Yeah.
buyer probably is like, just get the 80.
Yeah, we just never thought that it would be something.
Actually
We would-
dealing with that right
yeah.
now.
We knew it wasn't an FHA property, I didn't think about VA.
Yeah.
So just something to, it was new to me.
Yep.
Good tip.
And I'm gonna go quickly because I want to be respectful of people's times, but I will stay here as long as you need me, okay? But if anyone has to leave, I totally get it. I prep my clients and say, every offer I've ever written, and 90% of the ones I receive are gonna ask that you pay for it. So in advance, while we're getting it staged, while we're getting photos or whatever, go ahead and order the septic compliance and the well test. Because if the well water comes back that it needs high in chloroform or nitrates or whatever, that's a pretty easy fix. If the septic comes back not compliant and it's winter, now we're talking potentially escrowing. It could be an $18,000 to $25,000 fix. So we need to know that so that we know how to negotiate it. Now, you may decide to list it $15,000 cheaper and say price has been reduced by $15,000 to allow for the buyer to fix the septic. Like, it's all negotiable, but if it is a property that needs to seal a well, because that's kind of a concern, if you have a well that's no longer used, at time of transfer, they're gonna want it sealed. And I have it in here again, it just is a marker for me, have this conversation. There may be a survey, the client may tell you, I got a shed that I built, and I didn't really do a survey, come to find out, it might be on the neighbor's property. Well, just to get ahead of it, you may want to say, we need to put a $700 survey fee in there because it's gonna be important that you can convey what your property line is. So it's not common, but it's possible. Home warranty, I just plugged in a 600. You can get them cheaper from different companies and they can go up to $2,000 if you wanted to. I put it in here just, I say optional, negotiable, just to get them thinking about it. And this might be a place where in the listing presentation, you're there at the house and everything is really great, but the appliances are shot. And the furnace is 24 years old. This is where you can kind of have that conversation of, if we offered a 1-year home warranty, that will overcome the objection a buyer's gonna have on the fact that your furnace is so old. So they might even waive the inspection, knowing that their only real concern was the furnace, and this will protect you. Okay. Oh my goodness.
Don't wave your hand.
Okay, okay, sorry, I'll talk with my hands. Broker Administration Commission, I just found out we need to change that to commission, not fee. I've always called it fee.
Well done.
Looks like it needs to be changed on the instant.
I saw that too, actually.
So once again, mine's better. But I hear you
In
say.
every way.
We actually reached out to our title company too and asked them to change it
Oh,
on
good.
their, on the.
I didn't like it, I understand we have to do it, I don't like it, because you're already saying, I'm paying 6% commission.
Exactly.
Fee sounded like all these other expenses.
Yep.
Commission sounds like you're trying to squeeze more money out of them, so I don't like it, that's my on the record comment, but this is for compliance what it needs to be. Who wants to give me the script of what they say of how they describe it? Monique?
So for us, we usually say it's for a broker to review the documents, to hold all the legal documents for a certain amount of time, and that's kind of.
That's pretty good. I use words like, unfortunately, this is a fee that I can't control. This is a fee that's by my brokerage. We're one of the lowest in the industry. You'll find most of the time they're $500 to $700, depending on the brokerage. Buyer's gonna pay their own fee to their brokerage as well. I just wanna make it clear, I'm not charging it. It's not negotiable. And I say, things like, next year when you're doing your taxes and you need a copy and I've died, call the brokerage, they will have a copy, you know what I mean? And it's for use of the licensing, and it's to pay for our front desk who answer questions if you call. I throw in like 4 or 5 things, because you gotta show the value of it, or it's ridiculous. I don't know if anybody in here, I know a lot of teams, I don't know if you wanna talk about this, Melissa, they charge more. Do you guys charge more? Okay, I don't get it, but you're allowed to do whatever you want. So the reason why a lot of teams will do it is $4.99 is what the broker gets. Here's your chance, if you are paying an admin, or if you're paying the contract to close people, you may want to add another $100, $200 or whatever there to help offset those costs. It's your business. This is all the broker requires. You can do whatever you want.
Trying not to take it personally, it just is important that they understand it doesn't come to me as the broker.
Oh, yeah.
It comes to the brokerage.
Yeah.
And if you've ever done the math in the past, I'd be like really rolling in the dough.
It should say brokerage.
Well, yeah, just to make sure that it is clear to your client, it is for the brokerage.
Feel free, because it's on the contract. I think the templates have it automatically added on there, right? The $4.99 on the listing contract.
And the buyer.
Yeah, feel free to change it to brokerage, because I think that's better. You're right. They probably think, why is your broker getting paid by me? I haven't met her. I don't even know who she is. So that's a good point.
She's out buying new clothes and her.
She's on the lake.
I'm gonna do the math right now for that.
So,
She's on a beach somewhere.
who understands the market size of business? Would you be really rich, right?
What's that?
You'd be really rich.
Yeah, it's almost 800,000.
Oh, wow. That's how you afford it.
That's a little bit more than the 700,000 Olivia pays you to be our rep.
It's like a couple more zeros.
I was gonna say, but you know.
So you guys are all individual business owners, right? The brokerage is a business. So this is actually how this is income for the brokerage, and this is what allows us to have certain trainings and keep tech fees low. And so it is income, and it's important. And as a part of the LLC, we review, because the more money we make and the less expenses we have, the more profit share we're all gonna have, which is really, really important. Conservation fee, or as Steve says, the loon tax, it's required, and I tell them, I'm like, it's crazy, but $5 to feed the ducks. And that's how my title company presents it at closing, to keep it lighthearted. And it's only $5, but it's still $5. And then duck handling or a courier fee. So I asked specifically my title company, what are the different types of costs? I keep it on there because, again, I'd rather it be on there and not a surprise when it's on the final settlement statement. So let's say they have to overnight get the payoff to a lender, or get the payoff from a lender, because maybe they tell you 5 days before closing, oh, I made another mortgage payment, and so now the payoff maybe isn't good, or closing got extended 2 weeks, and so that's to cover getting payoff to or from the lender. Overnight mailings, maybe the client is insisting on the proceeds check being overnighted to an ex-husband who's on there as well. So it's kind of a catch-all. And that's it. So total selling expenses without the mortgage is here. The formula will also tell you total selling expenses with paying off the mortgage here. Well, right now they look the same, but we're going to go through very quickly in 3 minutes, putting in some numbers. Do you mind from the top?
You're not mine, going to the top.
For easy math, we are going to say the taxes are $3,600 a year. Whoa, where'd you go? Now look at that. Can you go all the way to the very top?
Oh, very good.
So it calculated taxes per day because, oh wait, sorry. Because we have in here that we're closing on the 31st. Sorry, you were at the top. Interest rate for, if you know that they bought way forever ago and it's 7, go ahead and put that in, but they probably have refinanced, so 4 is a safe number to use. Now at the time of offer, let's say we find out we're closing on the 4th. You change day of the month to 4th? This is why it's important to do this twice. One is an estimate, one, here's the actual contract we have in hand. Fees are what they are. So sales price. Let's say we're at the listing appointment and I think it's between 400, 420, 425 and 450. present mortgage. Let's go ahead and put in there that they owe 200. If what you can do is redo the formulas, so you can type it here, it carries over, but. Okay, so now it's calculated for you at 4% interest rate. If you close on the 4th, you're gonna pay $87.67 of interest. Second mortgage payoff, most likely they don't have one, so we won't do that one. Special assessments. I don't know, how many times, what percentage do you think people have this on their tax record? 20?
Not even.
10? So we're not gonna put anything in for this example. So no new carpeting. So it's now calculated commission. My commission is $13,200. The buyer's agent would be $10,800. And again, this is where I have the conversation, you know, it makes sense, right, Mr. Seller, that I would get a little bit more commission since I'm the one that's incurring all the fees and doing all the work. Ha ha ha. They always say yes. Settlement fee to title company, we already talked about, it doesn't change. It's now calculated required state deed tax by taking $3.40 per thousand. Can you scroll for me? Yes. Everyone who has a map knows that I do. So balance of real estate taxes. This must be right. The formula's off.
Oh, I think
He
accidentally
changed
started
one
typing in there.
Copy the middle, copy
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
cell
just
over to
drag it
the
over.
front.
You're killing me, Smalls.
It went to the same
It's
cell.
not right because it needs to pull this sales price. It will be fixed by the time you get it, but we'll just move on for the sake of, no, we need to. We just type in 900 just to. Okay. Closing costs. So right now the formula does take 3%. I would encourage you, based on the market that you're in, to decide whether you want to throw in really worst case scenario and assume they have to pay 3%, or take it out, but this is the calculation right here. And again, it's based on sales price, so it's taking 3% times 450, 3% times 475, 3% times 500.
Hey, Scotty,
Yes.
what I've done, I actually have 3 boxes off to the side that don't show up on this, where I can plug in the percentage of closing costs, whatever percent, and it calculates into.
And really, it's the same thing, like right now, the formula says 3%, but you right then, if you have your computer there at the listing presentation, you can play with it real time, like what if we pay 2%? What if we pay? And a lot of times I do email this to them so that they can actually see how to fudge the numbers. I know me, if I list my house, I want always to know how are these calculations determined. And again, I think I've told you, I don't really put this in, but you could, so you could put in a fee of $275 across the board. Association dues, you can prorate them. I just tell people they are trued up at closing. You are responsible for the days of the month in that month that you lived there. But you can, do I even have a calculation in there? I don't think I do. Yeah, I don't. But you can, like if their dues are $250 a month, you can say we're closing on the 15th, so we'll just put in $125. Because again, when you have an offer, you need to update each one of these line items. Homestead differential, by now you'll know the contract you accepted asks them to pay any homestead differential. Let's say they don't have a survey or well, and these are all paid kind of outside of closing, so I typically will just list them over here, like paid when offers accepted, paid when offers accepted, because otherwise the final settlement statement won't match what's down here because I've included that cost. Home warranty, by now you'll know. I go online, depending on what the client has, or the buyer has asked, is saying seller may pay for a home warranty up to $700. Well, I'll put $700 in there because that's what, they can order whatever they want up to $700. So you'll know this at time of offer. This hasn't changed, this hasn't changed, this hasn't changed. So as you can see, total costs, selling expenses on this 400, is that what we used, 400? Is $39,000. With the mortgage payoff, it's $239. I like both of these numbers Because this is the 239 is closer to what they're actually gonna see at the final closing. So now, if you're like me, do a gut check. At the end of this, make sure the numbers make sense. I'll go into this in a second, but I tell my clients, you can expect fees to be about 7% of listing. And why is that? 6% commission and about another 1% in miscellaneous fees. Now, if you have other things up in there that kind of are in there, like specialty, like an assessment paid off, or, well, it might be a little bit more, to kind of run that calculation, we're a little higher, aren't we? 400 times 7, that'd be 28,000. Can you scroll back up? Why do we have?
I think the point that Scotti is making right now is one of the most valuable that you should take away from this class. The spreadsheets are helpful, the templates that KWPR provide are resourceful, but it is ultimately a really important part of your job to double check that math and make sure that you're demonstrating to them that selling expenses are around 7%. Because if you just whip this out without calculating it and it's 3%, which means their selling expenses are doubled, when they get to the closing table, they will be incredibly upset.
Here's why this was higher. Like the amount was more than 7% if you guys did the quick math. It's because I had put in here that they're paying 3%. So if 7% is our gut check and we're paying 3% of closing costs, it's really 10%. That's your gut check. So they need to be 40,000 or less to show that we are in our gut check. And so he changed this to 0 because in this offer, we're not paying any closing costs. And when you scroll down, we're at that 7%. So that's how we know our numbers weren't funky. Because what if you typed 16,000 versus 1,600, or, it's very easy to make those mistakes. This is kind of your double check. And then the very last thing that I do and I use in my listing presentation is I have total, if you scroll down just a little bit. I put in here square feet, because how many of you know, like a new construction price per square foot might be $290. And for a basic Rambler in Apple Valley, it might be $110, right? So I put in here, just to kind of remind them, all square footage is not created equal. So let's say there's 2,000 square feet, and now it's calculating, we're basically selling at 200, is that right? Am I good? Square feet, oh, for some reason it's got dollars. You understand the concept. Like if this is the number of square feet, take the selling price of 400, divide it by 2,000 square feet, then that tells you the price per square foot. I like it because, again, if you're saying, hey, Mr. Seller, if you spend $20,000, we can list it at 50,000 more, and it changes the price per square foot.
I really like that, because as we show them all the spreadsheets in our CMA, it all breaks down price per square foot.
Yeah, and how many of you know you can go to a listing presentation with a CMA and it says your range should be 4 to 450, and you're like, this is so stupid, because it's pulling information that's not really good. None of these have finished basements, and mine has 1,400 square feet, or vice versa. So, okay, what questions? I think we've covered all of this. Recording satisfactions per mortgage, that's $46. The lender work orders, we didn't really talk about that. In the offer, especially VA, FHA, the buyer can ask that the seller will pay up to a certain amount in work orders. Now, what kind of work orders would there be? Let's say you're buying a house that has a little bit of peeling paint on the garage. And you know it's gonna be probably $500 or $200 or whatever to have somebody come out and scrape the paint. Buyer may say, I want the seller to pay that. So again, it's all negotiable. I usually, on the original net sheet, keep it at 0, because it's not really common to ask the seller to pay for any work orders in the offer. And then when I get the offer, if it's in there, I update it. So why you have to use it, individual expenses, deferred taxes and assessments. What questions do you have?
Is there?
Oh, it would just be a technical one. So for you, Melissa, or for whoever, when we want them to sign it, do we just go ahead and upload that into?
Very good question. The way that I do it, the right answer is you should always be in front of your clients filling out, right? But commonly, we will send the listing documents electronically for them to sign. I always have them sign this at the end. That's easy. I prepare a new one when I send the offer that will say, here's the offer that I've presented to you already. sign everything. The last sheet is the updated net sheet. I did this once, the first year of my career, and never again. Whatever you do, don't take that signed offer from AuthentiSign and forward to the other side. Because it has confidential, which you valid in agency, information that you just, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So be sure that you look at that PDF, get rid of the net sheet before you send anything. I'm not a fan unless it's a simple amendment or something. I don't like just forwarding something from AuthentiSign for that reason. So keep that in mind.
In the KW proceed sheet, there is a line item that says lender processing fees. Can you just describe what that is and what amount you put in for it?
I put nothing in because in my career, I haven't seen any. That's almost always, all loan products will let the buyer incorporate any lender processing fees into their mortgage. Rarely does it need to be paid outside of the mortgage. And so for the 1% of the time or 5% of the time that it happens, I don't think it's worth worrying about an amount. So for lender, remember, lender is the buyer side. There are very few fees that the lender refuses to let the buyer pay for. I think it used to be the case in VA,
Right.
where sellers had to pay that VA fee or whatever, but not anymore. They can roll it into their loan.
Scotty, this was so helpful.
I'll teach it again because it's a lot of information, and I know a lot of people who wanted to be here couldn't be here, so let me know. I will put this on, my buddy here will put it on the dashboard.
Thank you, thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
It'll be in this area, under transactions, resources, for transactions.
Well, that's just it, right? Especially like.
You'll also find the dish report stuff, it's there. It's in there,
Like I didn't even take a week off.
all good.
Yeah.
It's there.
It is, it's so good. Quite refreshing, actually.
What'd you think? Any new, did you learn anything?
Yes. Yes, I did.
You should be teaching it. You're the Neo video.